The battlefield was quiet after the storm of war. Smoke still rose from the broken towers of the alien city, and the streets were filled with ashes, silence, and fear. The proud banners of a once powerful empire now lay torn in the dirt. Among the ruins, a woman walked slowly, her steps heavy with shame and pain. She was no ordinary woman. She was a princess of this fallen world. Her once glorious crown was gone, her royal robes were torn, and her eyes held only despair. In her arms she carried a small child. The girl was weak, her cheeks pale, her tiny hands clutching at her mother's chest as if afraid to let go. The princess whispered softly to her daughter, promising that everything would be all right. But deep inside she knew she had nothing left to give. Her people had betrayed her, her armies were gone, and her throne was dust. All that remained was the little girl in her arms, and the will to keep her alive. On the edge of the ruined square stood a line of human soldiers. Their armor was marked with the scars of battle, their weapons still smoking from the fight. At their center was the commander, a tall man with calm, watchful eyes. He had fought many battles and his heart was strong, but even he felt something stir inside him as he saw the alien princess approaching. She stopped only a few steps away, her knees trembling. Slowly she sank down onto the cold stone ground, holding her daughter tightly. The soldiers raised their rifles in alarm, but the commander lifted his hand, signaling them to wait. The princess lifted her head. Her face was dirty, streaked with tears and ash, but her beauty was undeniable. Her eyes, once full of pride, now shone with desperation. Her lips trembled as she spoke words that shocked everyone around her. "Take me," she whispered. Her voice broke, but she forced the words out again. "Take me as your concubine. Only give food to my daughter." The commander's eyes widened. Around him, his soldiers muttered in disbelief. Some smirked, thinking it a trick. Others pitied her, seeing how far she had fallen. A princess once untouchable, now offering herself in humiliation just to save her child. The little girl, confused, tugged at her mother's sleeve. "Mama, what are you saying?" she asked softly. But the princess only pulled her close, tears sliding down her cheeks. The commander stepped forward, his heavy boots echoing on the broken stones. He looked down at her, not as an enemy, not as royalty, but as a woman who had lost everything. "Why?" he asked quietly. His voice was calm but firm. "Why would you say such a thing?" The princess lifted her chin, her pride fighting against her despair. "Because I have nothing left," she whispered. "No army, no throne, no home. Only her." She looked at her daughter, who now hid her face in her mother's arms. "She is my world. If I must crawl on my knees, if I must beg, if I must give myself away, then I will. For her." The commander studied her for a long moment. He saw the shame in her eyes, the fear in her trembling hands, but also the unbroken fire of a mother's love. It was not seduction in her words. It was survival. Behind him, one soldier muttered, "Sir, we should send her away. She's the enemy." Another sneered, "A princess reduced to begging? Let her starve." But the commander raised his hand again, silencing them. His gaze never left the woman before him. He saw her daughter peek out, her wide alien eyes full of hunger and fear. And in that small face he saw innocence. The princess pressed her forehead to the ground, her voice breaking as she pleaded. "Please, I beg you. Take me, use me, shame me if you must. Just don't let my daughter die." The silence that followed was heavy, filled with tension. The soldiers shifted uneasily, waiting for their commander's judgment. The human commander felt his chest tighten. He had fought many wars, had seen enemies fall and empires crumble, but never before had he faced such a plea. It was not the voice of a queen demanding power. It was the voice of a mother sacrificing everything. He bent down slowly, his shadow falling over her. "Lift your head," he said softly. The princess hesitated, then raised her eyes to meet his. Her face was wet with tears, her body shaking, but her gaze was steady. He looked at the child in her arms. Small, fragile, innocent. Then he looked back at the princess, broken yet unyielding in her love. The commander felt the weight of a choice pressing on him. If he turned them away, they would not survive. If he accepted, he would be breaking every rule of war. His men would question him. His leaders might punish him. But in his heart, he already knew what he could not do. The princess whispered again, so faint it was almost lost in the smoke-filled air. "Take me, and please, take me, so she may live." And in that moment, the commander realized this was no ordinary encounter. This was not about victory or defeat. This was about destiny. The commander did not move for a long time. The princess's desperate words echoed in his ears, louder than the crackling of fire in the ruins around them. He had heard many cries on battlefields, men begging for their lives, soldiers cursing in pain. But never had he heard a plea so strange, so full of both shame and love. His men were restless. Some shifted their rifles, others muttered under their breath. A few laughed quietly, mocking the alien woman's fall, but others, though they would never admit it, felt the same unease that now burned in their commander's chest. The commander stood tall, his eyes fixed on the princess who still knelt on the ground, her forehead nearly touching the dust. The child in her arms stared at him, big eyes wide with fear and confusion. She was too young to understand why her mother had begged like that. One soldier stepped closer and whispered, "Sir, we can't take her in. She's royalty of the enemy. If command hears of this, we'll be court-martialed." Another soldier snorted, "Let her crawl. Let her beg. She's nothing now." The commander didn't answer. His thoughts were heavy and his heart was at war with his orders. His duty was clear: treat all survivors as prisoners or leave them behind. His loyalty was to his people, his army, his chain of command. But deep down, something inside him stirred, a quiet voice that refused to be silenced. He remembered his own childhood, the hunger in his village during the long war years. He remembered his mother's hands, cracked from hard work, holding him close even when she had no food to give. Looking at the princess now, clutching her daughter with the same desperate love, he felt a memory awaken within him. The little girl coughed softly, the sound small but piercing in the silence. She whispered to her mother, "Mama, is he going to help us?" Her voice was so innocent that it stabbed straight into the commander's chest. The princess shushed her daughter, kissing her hair, but her eyes remained fixed on the ground. She dared not look at the human commander again, afraid of rejection, afraid of seeing coldness in his face. One of the younger soldiers suddenly shouted, "She's a liar! This is a trick. She wants to get close and stab us in our sleep." The commander turned sharply. "Silence." His voice cut through the air like steel. The soldier lowered his head, but the suspicion remained in his eyes. The commander stepped closer to the princess. His shadow fell over her again, but this time he spoke with a strange softness. "Stand up," he said. Slowly, trembling, she obeyed. Her arms tightened around her daughter, as if she thought he might take the child away. Her knees wobbled, her back bent under invisible weight, but still she stood before him. Her face was streaked with dirt, her lips cracked, her eyes red from tears. Yet beneath all of that, he saw something else, something the war could not destroy. She still carried dignity even when broken. "Why come to me?" the commander asked quietly. "Why not to your own people? Why not hide in the shadows, escape into the forests, or seek allies among your kind?" The princess swallowed hard. Her voice was hoarse, but she answered with honesty, "Because my people have turned against me. They want my daughter dead so no claim to the throne can rise again. My allies have betrayed me. My guards abandoned me, and my palace is ash. Only you remain. Only humans stand here." Her words struck him harder than any weapon. Betrayed by her own kind, forced to kneel before her enemy. It was not just desperation. This was the death of pride, the death of a whole life. The commander turned away for a moment, his gaze sweeping across the ruined city. He knew his decision here would follow him forever. If he saved her, he would break rules, defy his leaders, maybe even put his men in danger. If he rejected her, he would leave a child to starve and her mother to fall into the hands of enemies worse than death. It was a heavy dilemma. His mind whispered duty, but his heart whispered mercy. Finally, he looked back at her. The princess held his gaze now, even as her body trembled. Her daughter clung to her neck, whispering softly, "Mama, I'm hungry." The commander clenched his fists. Duty could wait. Orders could break. But a child's life, an innocent life, was not something he could cast aside. "Enough," he said firmly. His soldiers looked at him in surprise as he pointed at the princess. "She and the child come with us." The camp exploded with protests. "Sir, this is madness. She'll betray us. Command will have your head." But the commander's voice thundered louder, silencing them all. "I said they come with us." The princess gasped softly, her eyes widening. She had expected rejection, perhaps even death. Instead, she heard the impossible: acceptance. For the first time in many days, she felt hope. The little girl smiled faintly, her small voice breaking the silence. "Mama," he said, "yes." The princess clutched her child and whispered, barely holding back tears, "Yes, my love." He said yes, but deep inside the commander knew this was only the beginning. By choosing mercy, he had stepped into a storm far greater than the war itself. The night was heavy with silence. The human camp lay hidden between the broken walls of the alien city. Fires burned low and the smell of smoke clung to the air. Soldiers rested in shifts, but whispers still spread among them. Whispers about the alien princess and her daughter, now sheltered inside the commander's tent. Some soldiers spat on the ground when her name was spoken. To them, she was not a guest but a burden, a risk that could destroy them all. Others argued quietly, saying the commander had done the right thing. Yet even among them, doubt was strong. The commander sat outside his tent, staring into the flickering fire. His thoughts were restless. He had chosen mercy, but now that choice weighed like iron on his shoulders. Every soldier's stare reminded him of the rules he had broken. Every shadow seemed to ask the same question: was this decision his downfall? Inside the tent, the princess sat quietly with her daughter. She kept her arms wrapped tightly around the child, as if afraid someone would take her away. The little girl was finally asleep, her face calm at last after days of fear and hunger. But the princess could not rest. Her ears caught every murmur outside, every footstep, every hiss of suspicion. She knew well how soldiers looked at her. She had seen their disgust, their distrust. And worse, she knew the truth. Her own people would never forgive what she had done. To them, she was not a princess anymore. She was a traitor who had begged the enemy for survival. Far away in the ruins beyond the city, other eyes watched as well. A group of alien survivors had seen her enter the human camp. Rage burned in their hearts. To them, the princess's surrender was the final betrayal. Once they had sworn loyalty to her throne. Now they wanted her blood. Among them, a messenger whispered, "She kneels before a human." She even offered herself to him. "The princess is lost. The child must die, or she will grow to reclaim the crown." The leader of the survivors clenched his fist. "Then we shall deliver her to the warlord. He will reward us for her capture." And so, betrayal spread in the shadows. Back at the human camp, one soldier approached the commander. His face was hard, his eyes sharp. "Sir," he said quietly, "you've made your choice, but don't expect all of us to follow blindly. Some of the men are angry. They say you've risked everything for an alien woman. They don't trust her. They don't trust you anymore." The commander's jaw tightened. "And you?" The soldier hesitated, then shook his head. "I obey orders, sir. But if she brings death to us, remember this was your decision." When the soldier left, the commander's eyes turned to the tent. He could see the faint light of a lantern inside, shadows moving softly. The princess, awake while her daughter slept. He wondered what she thought of him. Did she see him as a savior or only a tool for survival? He did not know that at that very moment she was whispering to herself in her own language. "How far I have fallen. To beg a human, to kneel, to give away my pride. But for her, I would give away everything." Her hand brushed her daughter's hair gently, and for a brief moment her lips curved into a fragile smile. But then she heard something, a faint rustle outside the tent. She stiffened, her instincts sharpened. She had lived too long in the palace to ignore danger. The shadows were moving. Beyond the walls of the camp, hidden figures crept closer. Their eyes glowed faintly in the dark, their weapons glinting under the moon. The warlord's bounty had spread faster than fire, and now betrayal was ready to strike. The commander rose suddenly, his senses alert. Something felt wrong in the night, something heavy in the silence. He reached for his weapon and scanned the dark horizon. The princess, clutching her daughter, whispered under her breath, "They are coming." And in that moment, the fragile peace inside the human camp shattered. The night grew colder, and the campfire's glow turned weak against the dark. The human soldiers slept in uneasy silence, some with their hands still gripping their rifles. But in the commander's tent, sleep did not come. The princess lay with her daughter close to her chest. She tried to keep her eyes open, fearing what might come in the shadows, but exhaustion pressed heavy on her body. Slowly, against her will, her eyelids fell. The child's soft breathing lulled her into a restless sleep. Hours passed. The commander sat outside, guarding the night with quiet patience. He had fought many battles, but this, Protecting an alien princess and her child felt stranger than any war. Then, just before dawn, the faint sound of fabric moving caught his attention. He turned sharply. The tent flap shifted and out stepped the princess's daughter. Her small feet touched the cold ground, and she looked around with wide, curious eyes. The commander stood quickly, hand on his weapon, but then relaxed when he saw it was only the child. She looked up at him, not afraid, only watchful. "Why are you awake?" he asked softly, lowering his voice so as not to wake the camp. The girl tilted her head. "I heard you outside," she whispered. Her accent was different, her words a little broken but clear enough. "You did not sleep." The commander knelt down so his eyes were level with hers. "Someone has to keep watch," he said. The little girl studied his face for a long moment. Her eyes were bright, reflecting both innocence and wisdom beyond her years. Then, without warning, she asked, "Why did you save us?" The question struck him harder than any blade. He opened his mouth, but no answer came. He could not tell her about the rules he had broken or the risks he had taken. He could not say it was only pity, for in truth he himself did not fully understand. The child stepped closer. "Mama says humans are dangerous," she whispered, her small fingers twisting in the hem of her dress. "But you are kind." The commander felt his chest tighten. He saw her little hands thin from hunger, and the innocence in her voice. She was too young to carry the weight of war, too pure to know hatred. "Do you trust me?" he asked quietly. The girl thought for a moment, then nodded. "Yes, because when you look at Mama, your eyes are not cruel. When you look at me, you do not see an enemy." Her words silenced him. For years he had been seen as a weapon, a leader, a commander. But never as this. Someone trusted by a child who had every reason to fear him. Without thinking, he removed one of the small rations from his belt pouch and handed it to her. Her eyes widened as she took it carefully like it was treasure. She whispered, "For me?" He nodded. "Eat. You need strength." The girl smiled faintly, the first true smile he had seen on her face. She took a small bite, then looked at him again. "Will you keep us safe?" The commander hesitated. He knew the danger gathering in the shadows. He knew betrayal was close, but he could not lie. He placed his hand gently over his chest. "As long as I live, I will not let anyone harm you or your mother." The child's eyes softened. For a brief moment, the fear and sorrow in her face faded, replaced by trust. She stepped forward and, without warning, wrapped her tiny arms around his neck. The commander froze. He had not been hugged in years, not like this. Not with such pure, unguarded trust. Slowly, almost awkwardly, he placed a hand on her back. "Thank you," she whispered. Her voice was so small, but it carried the weight of hope. When the princess awoke moments later, she panicked at first, seeing her daughter outside the tent. But then she stopped, stunned as she saw the child in the commander's arms, safe, calm, smiling. Her breath caught in her throat. Something inside her shifted. She had begged for survival, humiliated herself for her child's sake. But now, seeing her daughter's innocent trust in a human, she wondered if destiny had chosen a path she could not yet understand. But in the distance, beyond the safety of the camp, unseen eyes still watched. The hunters were closer now, and soon the child's trust would be tested in fire and blood. The dawn was red, painted by the smoke of distant fires. The human camp stirred awake, soldiers sharpening blades, cleaning rifles, and whispering about the night. But beneath their routine movements, unease gnawed at them. Something in the air felt heavy, as if danger itself was crawling closer. The commander stood on the edge of the ruined wall, scanning the horizon. His instincts screamed at him this silence was unnatural. In war, quiet was never peace. Quiet was only the pause before chaos. Behind him, the princess walked slowly, her daughter holding her hand. The child looked brighter now, her steps lighter after food and sleep. But the princess's eyes remained sharp, restless. She too felt the storm approaching. She stopped beside the commander. "They are coming," she said softly. He glanced at her. "Who?" "My people," she whispered, bitterness in her voice. "Or what is left of them. They will not forgive me. They will not forgive us. To them, I am worse than dead. I am a traitor." Before the commander could answer, one of his scouts rushed forward, breathless. "Sir, movement on the east side. At least 50 armed. Not raiders organized," the camp tensed. Soldiers lifted rifles, their voices rising in anger. "This is because of her," one shouted. "They followed her scent like hounds." The commander silenced them with a glare. His voice was steady, but his chest was heavy. "Prepare positions. No one moves without my order." The princess pulled her daughter close, her face pale. She knew the truth. These were not random attackers. They were hunters, her hunters. And they would not stop until her daughter's blood stained the ground. As the sun climbed higher, the enemy revealed themselves. Alien warriors stepped from the smoke, their armor scorched but their weapons ready. At their front stood a towering figure, scarred and cruel, with burning eyes. The warlord, once a sworn protector of the throne, now the one who wanted it for himself. His voice thundered across the battlefield. "Princess!" he roared. "You disgrace your blood. You kneel before humans? You beg like a slave?" His words were venom, meant to shame her even more than his blade. The princess stood frozen, her daughter hiding in her dress. Her heart trembled, but she forced herself to answer, her voice shaking but clear. "I kneel for my child's life. I kneel for what you never understood, love." The warlord laughed, cruel and cold. "Then your love will die with you." He raised his blade, signaling his warriors to advance. The human soldiers tightened their lines. Fear rippled through them, but the commander's presence held them steady. He stepped forward, his hand resting on his weapon, and his voice rang out with sharp defiance. "If you want them," he shouted, pointing at the princess and her child, "you'll have to go through me." The warlord sneered. "You a human? You think your kind can stand against mine?" The commander's eyes were hard as iron. "I don't think." "I know." Behind him, the little girl clutched her mother's hand, her small voice trembling. "Mama, he's not afraid." The princess felt her throat tighten. In that moment, she realized the truth. This man, this human, was willing to fight for them. Not for power, not for reward, but because he had chosen to. Something no one in her world had ever done. The warlord's army began to march, their steps shaking the broken earth. The human soldiers raised their rifles. Tension snapped in the air like lightning before a storm. The commander glanced back at the princess once. Their eyes met and unspoken words passed between them. "Stay alive. Protect the child. Trust me." Then he drew his weapon, raised it high, and gave the order that would decide all their fates. "Hold the line." And the battlefield erupted once more. The battlefield roared to life. Gunfire cracked through the smoke. Alien war cries shook the ruined city, and steel clashed against steel. The warlord's forces charged like a wave, crashing against the human line. Dust rose, filling the air with chaos. The commander stood at the front, blade in one hand, rifle in the other. He cut down attackers with swift precision, each strike fueled not by orders but by the silent vow he had made to the princess and her child. His men fought beside him, though fear still burned in their eyes. The princess shielded her daughter behind a wall of broken stone. She pressed the child's face into her shoulder, whispering promises she wasn't sure she could keep. Every scream outside, every clash of weapons was a knife in her heart. The warlord strode forward through the chaos, his massive frame parting his soldiers like a beast among wolves. His eyes locked on the princess and his lips curled into a cruel smile. "There you are," he bellowed, "hiding behind your human pet." The princess's breath caught, but before she could speak, the commander stepped between them, his blade gleaming under the sun. "She is under my protection," the commander said, his voice calm but unyielding. The warlord laughed, raising his heavy weapon. "You would die for her? A human bleeding for alien royalty? You shame your kind as much as she shames hers." Their weapons clashed. Sparks burst as steel met steel, and the force of the impact shook the ground. The commander's men watched in shock. No one had ever seen him fight with such fury. Every strike was not just skill, but will. Every block a declaration. You will not take them. The princess watched with wide eyes, torn between fear and awe. She had seen champions duel in grand arenas, knights fight for glory, but never had she seen someone fight like this, for nothing more than a promise. The child, peeking from her mother's arms, whispered in trembling awe, "Mama, he fights for us." The duel raged on. The warlord's strikes were brutal, each one like a hammer meant to crush bone and spirit. But the commander's defense was sharp, his movements precise, his resolve unbreakable. Still, the warlord's strength was overwhelming. With a roar, He struck a blow that sent the commander crashing to one knee. The soldiers cried out, fear flashing in their eyes. The warlord raised his weapon high. You chose wrong, human. Mercy has no place in war. But before he could strike, a small voice pierced the chaos. Stop! It was the child. She had stepped out from behind her mother, her tiny form trembling but her eyes fierce. She stood between the commander and the warlord, her arms outstretched. For a heartbeat, the battlefield froze. Even the warlord hesitated, his weapon hovering in the air. The princess gasped, rushing forward, but the child's voice rang again. You call him weak for helping us, but he is stronger than all of you. Because he fights not for power, not for thrones, but for love. Her words echoed in the silence, carried over the clash of war. Soldiers, both human and alien, stared, shaken by the raw courage of a child. The warlord snarled, fury twisting his face. Foolish brat, you will die first. He swung his blade downward, but the commander surged up, blocking the strike with a roar. His weapon locked with the warlord's, his eyes blazing. You will not touch her. In that instant, the choice was made. The commander was no longer fighting for duty or even survival. He was fighting for them, for the child who had given him trust, for the princess who had given him faith. And in his heart he knew. This was not just a battle. This was destiny's test. The warlord roared, his massive blade pressing down with the weight of a mountain. The commander's arms trembled, muscles burning, but his spirit refused to break. Behind him, the child's small voice echoed again, fierce and unafraid. Don't give up. You promised us. Something inside the commander ignited, an iron resolve stronger than steel. With a sudden surge, he twisted his blade, knocking the warlord's strike aside. Sparks exploded, the sound ringing like thunder. The soldiers on both sides gasped. For the first time, the warlord staggered backward. Rage twisted the alien leader's face. He lunged again, but the commander moved with lightning speed, fueled not by orders, not by pride, but by the bond he had chosen. His blade cut through the air, striking the warlord's chest with a force that shattered armor and pride alike. The warlord fell to his knees, shock flashing in his eyes. His weapon slipped from his hands, clattering against the stone. The battlefield grew silent as every eye turned to him. The princess stepped forward, her daughter clinging to her side. Her voice was steady, no longer trembling. It ends here, she declared. No more blood, no more chains. My child will not inherit your hatred. The warlord spat blood, his glare burning with fury even in defeat. You betrayed your people. For a human. The princess looked at the commander, her gaze soft yet unyielding. No, she answered. I chose life. I chose love. With a final breath, the warlord collapsed, his shadow falling into the dust. The battlefield was still. His army, seeing their leader fallen, dropped their weapons and fled into the ruins. The humans stood victorious, but no one cheered. They had seen something greater than war, something that silenced even their doubts. The little girl ran to the commander, her small arms wrapping around his waist. You saved us, she whispered, her voice trembling with joy. You really saved us. The commander knelt, placing a hand gently on her head. No, he said softly. We saved each other. The princess approached slowly, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. For the first time since the fall of her throne, she did not carry despair on her face. Instead, there was hope. She bowed, not as a queen, not as a beggar, but as a woman offering gratitude. You gave back what I thought was lost forever. My daughter's future, and my own. The commander shook his head. I did what any man should do, but she held his gaze, her voice low and certain. No, you did what no one else would. You saw us not as enemies, not as burdens, but as lives worth saving. The silence between them was deep, filled with something unspoken. The child looked up, her innocent voice breaking the moment. Mama, she said softly, her eyes bright. Does this mean he's my father now? The princess gasped, caught off guard, but the commander only smiled faintly. He looked at the child, then at her mother, and for the first time he allowed himself to imagine a life beyond war. A father, he said gently, is not made by blood. It is made by choice, and if you'll have me, then yes, I will be. The little girl's laughter rang through the ruins, brighter than any victory trumpet. She hugged him tightly, and for the first time in years he felt whole. The princess's eyes filled with tears, but her heart was lighter than ever. What had begun as humiliation and despair had transformed into something greater than a throne, greater than a crown, into family, into destiny. As the sun rose higher, its golden light fell across the three of them, human, alien and child, standing together in the ashes of war. A new bond had been forged, one that neither galaxy nor hatred could break. And so in the ruins of a fallen empire, a new destiny began.